There are many staff that work in schools to support students beyond the classroom teacher. This is especially true for learners with complex needs. Sometimes you can have 5 to 10 or even more adults on a learner's team if you include parents and outside supports. Getting a group on the same page and moving in the same direction can be a challenge for any team, but can be even more challenging when there are those added complexities of severe challenging behavior. So how do teachers and BCBAs work together with others to support learners approaching or in crisis? Well, today my guests will answer that very question for us. Tina Gunn, who's a behavior analyst, and Julie Grundy, a very seasoned teacher, will share about their experiences doing collaborative work at the district level in the Surrey School District. They work together on the District Action Team for Autism, or DATA. Members of DATA support individual teams that are working with learners with complex needs. This means they're collaborating with a wide range of individuals all the time. While not all of the students on their caseload require it, they have also been implementing the practical functional assessment and skills-based treatment model in schools, also known as PFA and SBT process. Tina is actually an associate consultant with FTF Behavioral Consulting, the agency led by Dr. Greg Hanley, who has been the lead researcher and creator of the PFA and SBT process, which helps learners with complex, severe, and challenging behavior. Tina and Julie will share a little bit about their day-to-day work and then discuss the benefits and lessons they've learned in working with large school teams to support students with complex needs in a public school setting. Okay, here we go. Julie and Tina, thank you so much for joining me today on the Behavioral Health Collective podcast. And I'm particularly excited to be talking to you, first of all, because schools are in my history and just like in my blood. And so I'm so happy to be hearing the stories of collaboration in the school system. And also because you're the, I think, second or third group that I've had on with this new collaborative focus. So thank you so much for being here today.
Very happy to be here.
Thank you for inviting us.
So just to get started, can you tell me a little bit about your respective roles at the Surrey School District and maybe just a quick recap of your professional journey to this moment?
Go ahead, Tina.
Okay. So my current role is a district behavior analyst, and I work for the District Action Team for Autism, or DATA for short. And my primary role over the last 3 years has been the project coordinator for practical functional assessment and skill-based treatment within the Surrey schools. And a lot of that role involves training and providing coaching to district staff, as well as working very closely with the FTF consultants to just ensure this overall success of the project within our schools. I started my career out as a teacher, and I taught elementary and high school. I've also taught overseas for 3 years. And when I returned from teaching in Thailand, I really wanted to focus my work in the field of autism. So I actually left the school system for a couple of years and worked in a private ABA clinic. And then I just realized schools, public schools, was where my heart was at. So that's when I joined Surrey. And when I was in Surrey, or my time in Surrey, I've started out as an integration support teacher. Then I was a classroom teacher of an intensive intervention program. And now I'm in my current role as a district behavior analyst.
Awesome. Thank you. And Julie, a little bit about your journey.
Yeah, so I am, up until the June of this year, I was a special ed helping teacher, and I worked collaboratively with school-based integration support teachers and school teams at the elementary school level. And I am now going to be starting in September on the data team with Tina and the rest of our team, which I'm really excited about. Previously to that, I was an elementary school, primarily intermediate teacher, a learning support teacher, an integration support teacher, and then my current role at the district as a helping teacher. And I have a huge soft spot for collaboration. I've been working on that throughout most of my career. So working in this capacity just makes me really happy.
Awesome. That's great. So let's now chat a little bit about your work, your actual work together. And it sounds like you're going to be officially on a team this fall, but I know you've done other projects and worked together already. So how did it first come about that you started working together, and what has your work looked like to date so far? Like the day-to-day, the goals, the projects, kind of like higher level.
Yeah, so I mean, we met each other at the District Education Center, so our main office, and we were kind of in our own roles, but really we started working together when we started doing practical functional assessment and skill-based treatment within the school. And that's where we started collaborating more at the district level.
Awesome. So for example, you would have a referral of a common student and then be working with that student. Is that how that would work? Okay.
Yeah, primarily I would get referrals, and I would often reach out to the data team to help support if the situation was really complex. The role that I did was just me when I was going into elementary schools as an individual. And so for the complexity of some of the kids, it just made sense to work collaboratively with others because we were able to get a lot more done.
Okay, that's awesome. So just to understand the context of your school board, a referral from a school would come if they were not able to, if they required some outside support, they would initially come to a helping teacher such as yourself, Julie. Is that what you're saying? And then the data team is an additional support that a helping teacher could pull in if that student has autism.
Yeah, so it's different. I think it depends on the caseload that all of us have as helping teachers. We're all helping teachers. It's just the data team works primarily with kids with autism, whereas as a helping teacher, I work with a full spectrum of kids, including autism. And so it just depends on sort of which team it's going to go to. Some of them will go straight to the data team right from the district office. Some of them will come to me, and then I reach out to the data team because there's so many great minds on the data team, and we can work together.
Okay, that's great. Yeah, I mean, every school board is different. So I just wanted to kind of understand how that fit together. So let's get a little bit more into your specific work and kind of the context of you guys working together. So before we start talking about the work you could do, that you do together, I'm wondering if we could just do like a little rundown of some acronyms. So Tina, you did mention already practical functional assessment and skills-based treatment. So in the future, we'll call that PFA and SBT. And for listeners, I'll be linking all the acronyms that we're using today into the show notes because there's many in education, as we know. What are some other important ones that we should maybe go over at the outset?
Well, I guess ISCA might come up as well, and that's the interview informed contingency analysis, which is the assessment piece that is part of the practical functional assessment. So it's the functional analysis that happens, and then don't know what other ones you would like to hear. I guess there's like integration support teacher, we often refer to as an IST. We do have ABA support workers. So that's applied behavior analysis support worker, ABASW.
EA, educational assistants.
Okay, awesome. That's great. Yeah, because I think EA is an interesting one because, again, districts all have different names. Like sometimes they're just educational assistants in other places, depending on Canada, US, wherever. Different names. So ABASW are specifically trained in ABA. Is that correct? To support students who are autistic. Okay, got it. Great. Okay, so you kind of just touched on this, but how are services from helping teachers and the data team accessed in the district? And so are you kind of my hope for you to answer this is, what kind of situation are you coming into when there is a referral? Is it coming from, say, the classroom team, or is a principal putting this request in? Like, kind of where is that coming from?
I think it can come from all exactly what you said. So it can be initiated by a classroom teacher. So at the school level, classroom teachers can go to their school-based team, which is comprised of multiple people from the school psychologists, the SLP, the administrators, the classroom teachers, childcare workers sometimes, whoever the professionals that are working within that building to problem solve through what's happening with that individual child. And if it gets to a point where they're like, we sort of exhausted all of our experience and expertise at the school level, we then send in the collaboration request to the district office to ask for one of the helping teachers or the data team or somebody to come in to sort of help problem solve through what that might look like. So it comes from the school. Again, it depends on who's initiating it. It can be initiated by an admin, it can be initiated by a classroom teacher. Most often than not, it's initiated by a classroom teacher.
Okay. And just for context, by the time it gets to you folks, are teams typically in crisis? Is that generally the case or not always?
Generally the case for the data team, that's what's happening is people are in crisis. I know, Julie, you've had some other ones that aren't in crisis mode yet, but there's a potential for it to get there. But generally the referrals that come to our team, the students have quite complex needs. More often than not, there is severe problem behavior, and that is why our team is contacted.
Yeah. Okay. So that's, would you call that, criteria for the data team to be coming in? I mean, I guess, Julie, not all of yours are crises. So like, what is the criteria, I suppose, for that extra support? Just the fact that a team is not able to move forward, like they feel like they need extra support is the criteria?
Pretty much. Yeah. Like if they've reached out, somebody will connect with them in whatever capacity. And so sometimes I can go in and just have conversations, and same thing with the data team. Sometimes it's just a conversation of like, okay, what have you done so far? What's working? What's not working? What are the next steps? And that conversation is enough to then sometimes it's like, okay, we have that initial conversation. We physically actually will go in and meet the school team, meet the child, work really closely with that school team. So it's really dependent on the needs of the school, where the school is at, what the skill set of the school is. Some of our teams that are really new need more support just because the team itself is new, versus some of the teams have really experienced teams, and that child is really, really complex. And so it's very case specific. Okay.
So it's quite individualized. Now, I do want to hear a little bit about the implementation process of the PFA and skills-based treatment. So generally speaking, what does that process look like? Now, I don't, in this podcast, we don't need to target like, how to do PFA SBT. This is more about like your experience going through the process as professionals. So what does that look like in a school? Because, we know it happens in schools, clinics, homes, so specifically in the school. And I realize this is a very big question, but it sounds like there's potentially a lot of players involved. If you've got, district staff, then school, like administrators, classroom teachers, ABASWs, parents, like lots of people involved, which is maybe a little more complex than say a clinic or a home setting. So yeah, how does everybody contribute, and kind of what does that process look like?
Yeah, so the process for accessing that service is a little bit different. So we're kind of reserving that service for students that we call them our tier 3++. Like we've really tried that other process first, and we just haven't seen the results that we were hoping for. And part of this, we would love to give it to everyone, but part of this is, targeting the students that need that extra layer of support and that extra intensive treatment. And, we only have so many trained people within our district, like our implementation coaches, to support the process in the way that it needs to be supported to be successful. So we have an application process for accessing PFA SBT specifically, and that generally is it's an online form. They submit an expression of interest, and then once that is submitted, our team goes through it, and they look at the needs of the student, the needs of the school team, what supports they have in place. Are they able to support this intensive treatment? Because one of the lessons that we've learned over the years is if those specific supports aren't in place, providing the treatment, it just doesn't work. So we do kind of like an ecological assessment of the school team, and then we can start treatment from there. And generally, once we start treatment, we invite all the stakeholders to the initial meeting where we hold the open-ended interview, we gather our information, and then we design our ISCA. And, we start our assessment that way, and then we can move into skill-based treatment after that.
Okay, great. I mean, I love that you mentioned that learning piece that I think sometimes, as just helping professionals, we want to help everybody. There's a need, let's fix it. But I love that learning piece of, we need to make sure that it can be supported to be done in the right way with the right coaching and the right resources. And I think in schools, that's particularly important to question, because we know that there's so many variables on a day-to-day basis. One staff person is away, like, do we have a backup person that can do it today? Or, someone's off on an injury and then, oh, we can't run it. So I love that you're so thoughtful about whether that school team can support it or not,
Well,
and the district, everybody really.
There's the two pieces, right? Like, and this is fairly new in our district. Like, we've just completed our 3rd year, but we need to have our staff trained to competency in order to provide that treatment. Just reading an article and you may be listening to a podcast about it, that's not the training, that is not adequate training. Like, you really do need to have more intensive training, and you need to be guided by an expert in order to get really good at it. So we've really focused on providing quality treatment versus quantity. Like, everybody gets it, but nobody's really doing it, right?
Yeah, that totally makes sense. Have you so how have you found having so many people involved? Like, how has that gone, having big teams? Because it sounds to me like you potentially have like 8, 10, I don't know, like adults involved supporting one student. Is that correct? Like, that many people?
Sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes we have, and sometimes it's smaller, right?
Okay.
I mean, we really encourage school teams, or, the implementation coach who's assigned to that school team, to really invite all of the key stakeholders to that meeting. We just found that there's so much valuable information that is shared when everybody at that team is present, and everybody's allowed to provide some time and some space to share their thoughts, their feelings. And, it really is a healing process and a bringing together of that team. And we've just developed some really amazing plans for these students, and we're able to move forward. So some teams are quite large, and those initial meetings take a bit longer, and some teams are a little bit smaller. It really depends on, the stakeholders' availability, their interest, and all that other, factors that play into that.
Okay. Now, for a student who is in this process, what does their day-to-day look like in the school? So do they have that same ABASW working with them every day? I mean, maybe this is dependent on the team, the child, the school, but kind of what does it generally look like? Like, who's with them, and then how often are they going through SBT? And then when is it universal protocols? Kind of what's that ratio in the school setting?
So, I mean, it varies. That depends, as we always say in the PFA SBT world. It really does depend on the student and their needs. We do encourage to run treatment sessions frequently, because obviously the larger the dosage, the more progress you're going to see. But we have made it a minimum requirement that they're running sessions daily for at least 30 minutes to an hour. So some of our students are in session the majority of the day, with breaks, for lunch and recess and all that. But others they just have one session a day. So it really does look different, but we have made a minimum requirement, because we know if the dosage is too small, we're not going to see the progress that we are wanting to see. And we're investing a lot of time and resources, because it's usually 2 implementation coaches that are kind of guiding the process. So, we also have other schools that we need to get to and visit as well. So we just really want to make sure that that team is able to support the maximum amount of treatment. And universal protocol, we usually do an individualized universal protocol for that out of treatment time. As we develop that when it's needed, because usually the business as usual model isn't working outside of session. So we need a plan in place that is going to parallel the core values that we're practicing in treatment. So, the safety, televisability, and rapport all need to be happening in session and out of session.
Okay. And how often are you, say you two have a common student, how often are you on site with these teams, working with them? And then also, how often are the teams fully coming together throughout the process to work together?
The teams that I work with, so I have some teams that I work with other people, the teams that I work with Tina, we're on site, depending again on the nature of the student, weekly. if not sometimes 2 or 3 times a week. And then we have weekly meetings with the whole team to problem solve through sort of what has happened, celebrate the successes, what's our next steps, that kind of thing.
Okay. I'm really curious about working with parents, because that's obviously a really key part of working with students. So aside from, having parents at that initial meeting and then keeping them updated and maybe coming to team meetings, what could that potentially look like? Do you often have students who are, maybe a home BCBA is also going through the process with them, or what can that look like, and what has that looked like in terms of collaborating with parents and home teams?
Again, that has varied. Sometimes the home BCBA will be running a separate program. It might not be PFA SBT, but if they are, we generally want to come together so that we're running something that is similar, and we're collaborating so that we're not working against each other. And that has been very helpful, especially with our community partners that have kind of been involved in the process right from the beginning, right from 3 years ago, and they've learned alongside us, and they've done the training and whatnot. So they have been fabulous to work with, because they understand the process, they have hands-on experience, and we're able to collaborate. We invite them to our weekly team meetings, and we just kind of move from there. From our position, it's not really possible to provide direct coaching to parents. We just don't have the capacity within our time, because we have so many students that we need to, support, in school teams that we're supporting.
Yeah, I mean, totally understandable. And it's just the reality of the public education system that there's only so many people and so many hours and funding. But that's great, though, that parents and home teams are part of that collaboration throughout. That's awesome. So I'd like to know a little bit more about your working relationship together and get into that collaboration piece in a bit greater detail. So are there any times that you've been working together where you haven't agreed on something, and maybe someone was suggesting something or putting forward, and the other person thought, well, this is not going to work, or maybe on a team that you've been on together, and how did the team or you as a team come to a compromise or some sort of mutually agreeable conclusion?
Both of us, when we were looking at the questions ahead of time, we're like, I don't think we've actually ever not come together. And
awesome.
Yes. And we're like, well, why is that? Because, we're individuals and we have different takes on things. But we've worked really hard at building a connection and a trusting relationship to work together. And I think that's a really key piece. Even when you're thinking about the PFA SBT and that rapport that's built between student and implementer and the school teams and working together in that collaborative manner and meeting everybody where they're at, all of that kind of comes back into it as well, is having a relationship that you are able to trust in the process and trust in each other. So that was kind of like where we were coming from. We're like, yeah, so the idea of being able to brainstorm together and not one person being the holder of the information and being the person that has to be the problem solver. I mean, that's the whole benefit of being on these collaborative teams, is you have all of these people that come together with all of these great ideas. And we trust that process of like, well, what do you think about this? And what about this? And we can work our way through any of those different ideas because we can have those conversations.
That's so great. I like what you said about not one person being the problem solver. And I feel like when that pressure is off, when it's a team, like truly a team where everybody has different expertise to bring, nobody as the individual feels like this is on me. Like I have to come in and solve this. And, I think sometimes as district staff, it can feel that way. Like, even if there are a few district staff on a team, it's like, okay, well, we better have the answers for this problem. But, I like that. That's such a great perspective shift of like, let's just trust each other. And it's not up to one person here. Like it's the team. Let's do it. Let's do it together. So thanks for saying that.
Yeah. And I think one of the things too, like at the end of our meetings, we always have like a little action plan, and it's like, I'm going to do this. Okay, I'll take this on. And we all take something on. And like Julie said, there's such a trusting relationship. Like we say we're going to do it. We do it at such and such a time, right? Like that we agreed upon, and it gets done. And I think that's a key difference. Like I know I can trust Julie. If she says she's going to do it, it's done, right? And we work quite well that way. And I think too, just everybody on our team is a valued member. It doesn't matter what your role is, or everybody is important, and everybody has something valuable to contribute to the conversation, to the problem solving, and the planning. And I think that's really important. And we've established that right from the beginning, that everybody is valued at the meeting.
That's so great. Yeah, those are really important takeaways, I think, for anybody working on a school team, because it's true. It's the school team knows the child so well. If you're coming in as district staff, like you don't know this kid, like, you've read their file, maybe you've done an observation, met them or something, but they are truly experts in the child. And like, sure, maybe you have some things to offer that they haven't thought of yet, which is why they're calling you in, but they have so much to offer as well, or maybe things that are right there, that they have the knowledge to share. So yeah, thank you for mentioning that. I'm curious, sorry.
I was going to say, like, not just the expert in the student, they're the expert in their school culture. They're the expert in, the programming that has happened. They're the ones that have the relationship with the parents. And I'm like, I'm not the expert. I'm just here to kind of guide you and coach you. I can teach you some new strategies and, maybe help you change things a little bit, but you're the holder of all the information. I'm just going to draw it out and help you develop a plan. Right.
Exactly. Yeah. Like sometimes it's through that term coaching even, right? Like through that coaching process, it's drawing out maybe what is already there, or just kind of like reordering things, or kind of like reframing it a little bit. And the answers are often right there. I'm curious if either of you had experiences working with people outside of your trusting team that you've worked with before, and times you've had to kind of finesse a situation to come to an agreeable solution on a team where there maybe have been differences of opinion, because that, trust is earned, right? Like if there isn't that trust there, it is a little bit harder. And like, of course, you want to go into situations trusting people. But if you don't already have a pre-existing relationship, do you have any examples from that?
Yeah, I think that's the nature of what I love actually about our job, is that is working towards building that trusting relationship. And you I look at it the same way I look at working with kids. Like that trust has to be earned, and it's not automatic. And so we meet the people that we're working with, whether they're kids or adults, where they're at. And so you can sort of get a read on that. And you sort of collaborate at the speed and rate with which they're able and willing to do. So sometimes we can make leaps and bounds, and sometimes we have to take really little baby steps. And what is our common goal? And always going back to, well, our common goal is to make the situation as the best possible for this child. And that common goal is the center of it. So what can we do to help support you? What can you do to help support them? And really work at a pace and have those expectations at a rate that they're able to make those gains. And sometimes, like I said, sometimes it's small, but we celebrate those. And at some of our weekly meetings that we have with our teams, that's where we start, is what was the success this week? And it could be very, very small, but this is what you guys did, and let's build on that momentum. So absolutely, there's definitely some times where we have to work on building that relationship, and sometimes it just goes slowly.
I think I like that. To add on to that, like a flexibility on our part as well, like because Julie and I might talk after school, or we're messaging each other and we're like, okay, this is our plan for tomorrow. Julie's like, oh, I'm going to be on site, this is I'll help implement it. And she gets there and reads the situation. She's like, oh, this isn't going to work, right? And just being able to change things in the moment, and like Julie said, meet the team where they're at, and make those small steps, and your small wins.
Yeah, that I really like that, because I think, you know, in these like helping roles, you can feel like, okay, great, like let's go and like have like 10 different action items of like, let's get this done. But yeah, often a team is exhausted, and if they are in crisis, and yeah, so I really like that reminder of just like start small. What is the one little collaborative piece? Or if you're in a gridlock, like some teams are just, there's so many opinions and difference of opinion, and maybe there's gridlock. So where's that like one small shred of common ground that we can start with? So
that common goal, right? Like just finding out what the priorities are for that that team or that teacher or that EA or whoever you're working with. What is the priority, and just making some small gains towards what they value, right?
I'm curious about if there's anything that you've learned over the years, or things that you would have done differently in terms of collaborating interprofessionally with different, like you're both teachers, and I know like Tina, you're a behavior analyst, but like you're both teachers, you have that common ground. So with other professionals, any takeaways over the years? Or
I've learned a ton, I have to say, not just through my job as teaching and through our PFA SBT and all of these aspects of collaboration over time. Is there's been so many benefits. And again, I think for me, it always goes back to, what is our goal of coming in? Checking the ego at the door. This is not about me. This is not about you. This is about our common goal together. And how can we work towards that so that we can build on something. And I think the thing that when Tina and I were speaking earlier, the thing that we both have pulled out of the SBT process is when you start to see that momentum coming forward, and all of a sudden you have that EA that was so burnt out and just like, this is so hard. And they start to see some progress, and they start to have a bit of that job satisfaction and that like that pride of like, and that the mutually exclusive benefit of working with these kids that you can't even describe it. And they're like, yeah, this is amazing. And you build on those little small momentum, and then it sort of spills out over into all areas. I can't articulate it to like one specific thing, but Tina, help me out here.
I know. Well, I was just thinking, I think, and I remember this even from, back in my teacher education. And one of the things that was really drilled into me from my practicum advisor was be reflective of your practice. And I think that's something that has helped me to change my practice over the years. And, I reflect, okay, how did that meeting go? And sometimes I ask for feedback from, like, is there anything that I could do to help you? Like, what can I help you with? Because I think previously when I first started this role, I would come in and I'm like, okay, like, this is what you need to do, right? Whereas now I just approach it. I ask some questions, I get them talking, there's some storytelling and whatnot. And I, kind of set the tone, and I'm like, how can I help you? Right. And just being okay with that. So their goals and their priorities might not be the same as mine. I'm like, but just being okay, well, that's where we can start. Right. And I can help you achieve that. Let's build a plan together. So I think that's one of the main things that I've really changed in my practice, is just really listening to the team first, and then working from there and asking how I can help them instead of telling them how I'm going to help them.
Yes.
That's very good advice. Yeah, so true. Do you have any practical strategies, I suppose, when you are in those situations listening to teams? And, I've been there on the team where you're just you don't know what to do with a student. Like you're kind of at your wit's end, unsure. And yeah, the storytelling, which is like really cathartic in that moment for, classroom teachers, EAs to be like, and this happened, you're letting it out. But then, yeah, any practical strategies kind of when you're going down that road, and like when to kind of make that shift so it doesn't like remain in the negative. Yeah. How do you?
I've found that using the open-ended interview has been very helpful because there are some guided questions there, and you can kind of move the conversation along. But within each section, there is a little bit of storytelling, and we don't dwell there because we want to move forward. But I find that structure to help guide through the process, and we do need that little bit of time and space to get everything off our chest, and so everybody on the team understands where you're coming from, but we also can't stay there. Like you said, we need to move forward. So I do find that having kind of a plan or a structure is very helpful, and I've kind of refined that over the last 7 years in this position on how I approach teams for the first meeting, and just kind of guide through that process.
Now, would you recommend using that open-ended interview, even if you are not, even if you're not going down the road of the PFA SBT for whatever support you're going to give? So like Julie, you would use it. And okay.
Yeah. I've actually, because we have like a form that we have for, when we go into schools and, our initial contact, or if we're doing an observation, we have a specific form. So I've actually embedded those questions right into our form. And I've also added a few other questions. So like I always ask, well, what strategies have been tried? Which ones are the most helpful, or which ones have you seen progress? And sometimes, we can identify some stuff that's already working, and then I'm just able to kind of build upon that. So I'm shaping some behavior versus like, that's awful, here's a new one, right? And then it just opens that door to building the plan together. Because that's one of the other things that I've really learned, is that these plans have to be developed in collaboration. It has never worked for me to walk in and say, here's the plan, because they're like, oh, great. In the filing cabinet it goes, and never to be seen again, right? And it's not just you're giving them the plan, or you're developing the plan together, but then you also provide that support and implementation as well.
I also find that it's I had a question about like time and efficiency after it. Like, I also find it's like quite efficient compared to like, if you're going to do like a functional behavior assessment, like the old like FBA, that's like really lengthy, and it's hard to get an entire team together, but it's like so efficient because it's so rich. You get such rich information in a potentially very short period of time.
Yeah.
So that's really great advice. I like that.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask about practical tips when you have a team where you need to collaborate. You want to take this time to build a plan together, whether it's the interview or then getting into the action items and making the plan. In a school system, every board is different. We know this with scheduling and such. How do you guys do it in Surrey? I'm just curious. Like, when do you find those times to pull teams together?
It depends on the school setting and the situation, the staffing, and how school teams have sort of that embedded collaboration built into their school culture. Some schools have a really strong sense of collaboration, and it's easier for them to be freed up to meet together as a team to be able to build that collaborative plan. Other schools where things are sort of passed around and maybe that collaboration culture is still in the works, it does take a little bit of time. And I find that if we can get the administrators on board to help through some of that problem solving stage of like, how can we get these really important people together, and why is it so important that they're all together, and have them on board to see the importance of it, because they're the ones that can help make it happen at the school level, is a really key piece. And like I said, like some schools it's there and there's not those same roadblocks, but for the ones that it's still being sort of meshed out, for me, the administrator is a key partner in it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I find too, like, we now have the technology to meet online, which has been super helpful in getting everybody together for that initial meeting. And I actually found, like, when I go in person, they'd be like, okay, you can talk to this person for this amount of time, then you can talk to this person for that amount of time, and so on. And I found now, because I mean, our time is so limited now, like I'm just like, okay, I have this amount of time, I can do it on, I give them some options, and I'm like, can you get the maximum number of people together from the team so that we can meet together? And I just find the conversations are so much richer. The information that has come out of those meetings just helps expedite the process. Sometimes having a meeting that way, we can develop or start that plan within that one meeting. And I've had some that are like, okay, that's all we needed, thank you. And then I'm like, do you want me to do a follow-up? And they're like, no, we're good, we just needed help developing a plan. So it's, those conversations are super helpful. And I do firmly believe like having a meeting with everyone together is super helpful versus the one-on-one meeting with this person and meeting with this person and so on.
I think that was one of the benefits of COVID actually, was our push into technology and meeting online, because now I can have 6 meetings in a day, whereas before I was having 3 because I would have to travel between schools. And it's been a huge benefit that way.
And like you mentioned, like even getting parents in, like you can just get the maximum number of people, it seems like. If we have 50 minutes, like how can we get everybody here online together? Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I was just curious about that, because I think that's a constant struggle in the school system, because you're also dealing with like unions and and rightly so, right? Like people have work hours and breaks that need to happen and stuff like that. And that's really important. So it sounds to me like time is carved out in the school day. That's like the common thing. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. And like Julie said, usually the administrator can make that happen, right? And by the time, the collaboration request has gone through the process, they've been waiting quite a while to see us. So they're usually pretty good at making it happen if it's an emergency, right? So
yeah, that's great. The last thing I wanted to ask about were just generally, like, what are some benefits or highlights, like some like great successes you've seen with collaboration as a team? Like, are there any like moments that stand out or highlights?
Oh gosh, there's lots. I mean, for myself personally, like I have way greater job satisfaction. Like I just love working with my team members, and I've learned so much. And like we mentioned earlier, that pressure of having to be the expert in everything is kind of lifted because you have a team to support you. And seeing some of our really, really complex students that have kind of exhausted all of the traditional school resources, and they've also exhausted, community resources as well, making progress and seeing people happy. And, they join us on their online and they're like, guess what happened? Guess what my student did today? And, just seeing that joy, it's lovely. Whereas before we were always going in, it was always like, nothing's working. And now it's like, look at what's happened. And, that excitement. So that's been really great. And I think, I've developed so many partnerships with community partners, both like locally and internationally. So, and, we're learning from each other, and we're all facing similar challenges, and, we're working together to kind of brainstorm and how we can overcome those challenges. So that's been really great.
Yeah. And I think the idea of that multidisciplinary collaboration is you get to see what other people are doing in their passion. So looking at and working with behavior consultants and SLPs and parents, and they all bring something to the table that they're passionate about, and you have this shared experience that they can then share out on that passion. And like Tina said, like when you go back to a school and you have people running up to you and they're like celebrating this joy, and like this is like pure joy on their face of the successes of this student that has been struggling for so long. Like you can't replace that feeling and that experience. It's just amazing.
Boy. That's awesome. Oh,
Yeah.
That is really beautiful. What a great way to end this
I
conversation.
know when a support worker says, I love my student again, right? Like it's just it.
Wow.
I know it's, yeah.
That's really powerful.
Yeah.
And it just makes me think, of that phrase, like teach from joy, which is like what the SBT process is all about, teaching from the joy. And like that just overflows. Like if the student is happy, like the staff are going to be happy too. And I think both are important, right? Like we want staff to also be, have that job satisfaction working with their kids and like have that great relationship again. So that's great to hear. Thank you so much for sharing. Wow, such great stories and amazing insights on working together in school teams. And I think that's such a cool thing about the process that you're using is that it's inherently multidisciplinary because you're trying to get all the stakeholders. And in a school, there's so many stakeholders. So it's such a great example of collaboration. So thank you so much for sharing.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
The comments and views expressed in this podcast do not constitute or replace contractual behavior analytic consultation or professional advice. Views expressed are solely the perspective of the speaker and do not represent the views or position of their colleagues, employer, or other associates. Please seek out a behavior analyst through the BACB website if you would like to receive further behavior consultation. Until next time, take care.